Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to day 2 of the winter school. It is my honor and pleasure to be moderating this public lecture with Dr. Ahmed Al-Rawi. The title of the lecture is Misinformation, Surveillance, and Trolling on/in the Middle East. I will just briefly introduce Dr. Al-Rawi. Really, it's an honor and pleasure. Dr. Al-Rawi is a scholar that I'm sure many of you know or are familiar with, very prominent in the scholarly literature. So I think we all stand to benefit from his talk today. Dr. Al-Rawi is an associate professor of news, social media, and public communication at the School of Communication at Simon Fraser University. He's also the founder of the Disinformation Project. His research interests are related to news, global communication, misinformation, and social media, with emphases on Canada and the Middle East. Dr. Al-Rawi is also a founding member of the Media and Digital Literacy Academy in Beirut. In the program, you'll find an abstract of the talk that he's going to deliver. I'm not going to read it out now because we're already running behind on time. I'm going to give Dr. Al-Rawi 45 minutes to present to us, and then we will have about 25 minutes or so for Q&A. So with that, I turn it over to Dr. Al-Rawi.
Mohamad, thank you so much for the presentation. I also would like to thank the invitation I got from the Arab Center to be here and present my talk about misinformation in the Middle East. It's a great pleasure to be talking to everyone here. Most of the people here are experts in the field, so I don't think I'm going to bring anything new, but I'm just going to talk about some of the research that I have done in the previous, probably it's been a decade since I've been focused on the issue of misinformation. I'm originally from Iraq, so misinformation is a very popular topic in the country. Because, as you know, 2003, the U.S. invaded the whole country of Iraq using the pretext of weapons of mass destruction and the false connection between Iraq and Al-Qaeda, which were all false. So I got really inspired by the U.S., actually, especially their techniques, the ways by which they promote misinformation and wage war, which resulted in the death of over probably 1 million people. So when we talk about misinformation and its impact, this is a clear sign and indication of how misinformation could lead to the death of millions of people. And of course, we have today the genocide happening in Gaza. So it's an ongoing issue and a struggle that we have to, of course, be very much critical of, and also we need to be systematic in analyzing it. Okay, so just an issue of conceptualization. Again, I'm trying to be as brief as possible, but we start with the concept itself, misinformation, and I would like to talk about even these concepts that we have in Arabic. So, I kept on thinking and reflecting about the different words that we use in Arabic when we talk about false information. So I listed some. Oh, it's not showing. By the way, I have. I have my slides, please. So if you don't mind, show my slides.
Can we get the, is NSEB here?
Also here, if you don't mind.
There.
Sorry for that. Yeah, awesome. So I reflected on the different words we have in Arabic as well as in English about misinformation. So in Arabic, as you can see here, and I might be missing some of the other terms that we often use, مزيفة زائفة كاذبة مفكرة مغلوطة whatever. In English we have mis, this, there is also malinformation, fake news, false news, conspiracy theories. I can list them all. I've been studying them for all. It's a whole mess. There is a great deal of overlap. So many people talk about it in whatever they want. And some of these conceptualization might be a bit confusing, honestly. I called it a fractured conceptual paradigm. That's exactly what we have today. The public is confused about them, and I think we need to have a better understanding about these terms. I even looked at the Google Trends about how the public in general, the Arab public, uses the different words. It seems that they prefer the term akhbar kadibeh, false news, other than the other terms, for some reason. But when I compared it to the word di'ayat, rumors, it seems that it's ahead of the other terms. Of course, there is an overlap here, and the word di'ayat has been in circulation or in the academic literature in Arabic for several decades, actually. My late father even wrote a book about it back in the 1970s, probably. So what I suggested is, that's part of my project in Canada. Thank you, Mohamad, for talking about it. I suggested talking about these terms in another way, calling it maybe disruptive information, because the whole idea is to disrupt the status quo, disrupt our understanding of reality, disrupt what we think is happening. So I think the word disruption better defines how this is happening, or what is happening actually. And we can see this in any conflict, whatever conflict you want to focus on. And when we talk about disruptive information, I think it's useful to categorize it based on two dimensions, especially when we look at the sources. So I'm here arguing that we can look at the elites, and there are different types of elites who send information, and we can look at the public, and public is active, as you know, in also creating and disseminating disruptive information. And the other word I use is polarized, because usually the public will be involved in spreading misinformation or disruptive information when there are opposing parties. In any conflict, there are opposing parties, or in any controversial issue, there will be opposing parties. And for the elites, I focused on the different ones, including political actors. Yes, politicians are involved in spreading misinformation. Yes, they are very active in all countries, actually. There is also mainstream journalism, whether they admit it or not. In many cases, they do spread misinformation. Foreign trolls, fringe journalism, alternative journalists, they do that, whether on social media or their own platforms. But I just want to talk about the wealth elites, maybe not very common in the Middle East, but they are very active in other places, including, for instance, actors working for the oil and gas industry, actors working for the tobacco industry, and more recently, the vaping industry. The vaping industry has been very active, very much trying to spread a lot of misinformation about the so-called benefits of vaping, which has become a problem, of course, especially for young people in many countries. So that's my model. Again, we talk about the need for clearer conceptualization. That's my very humble, very small contribution. Hopefully, it's part of a book. Hopefully, it will be published soon. I think I got invited for my other book about cyber wars in the Middle East, which is why I'm using this slide, which is my own model or conceptualization about how I view information operations. So whenever we have a conflict, whenever we have some kind of political tension, there will be information operations happening. So I try to visualize it in this model. And probably the best example I can give is during the blockade on Qatar that happened a few years ago. And I think, and by the way, the examples I gave in my book were all related to that incident, where we have nation states hacking other nation states, and trying to even influence the citizens of Qatar and neighboring countries using different methods. So when we talk about information operations, these like methods could include hacking, and that's well known, of course, because of some countries like Italy, Israel. They've been exporting a lot of spying tools to other countries. And they could also use misinformation. And of course, social media will be part of it. So my conceptualization of these information operations look like this, where usually nation states have stronger say. So if you notice here the vertical flow, it's top down, because usually it's stronger than the other actors. They have, let's say, more comprehensive means by which they can reach more people and influence them. Again, through spying, through their news organizations, through social media, and through what we call cyber warriors. So cyber warriors is a term that is usually applied to sympathetic voices or people who feel a duty to support their authoritarian states. We call them cyber warriors. There are so many examples of cyber warriors in probably all countries, especially when we talk about the Middle East. So cyber warriors, you can find them on social media, for example, where they just try to cheer for their leaders, support them, not necessarily working for their leaders, which means they are not paid by these states, but they feel a duty. They feel a sense of nationalistic, let's say, whatever, affiliation to do so. So we call them cyber warriors. And it's really hard to know whether they are paid or not. So I will not go there. It's almost impossible. Like, even if you interview them, they can simply lie. They can say, well, we are not paid. What can you do about that? We are not in the, as researchers, we are not in the business of, FBI investigation. It's just trying to understand. So I think there are limits by, preventing us from knowing more. So cyber warriors is the term used here. Finally, when we talk about information operations, there is a general framework or theory called networked authoritarianism. It's well-known theory that has been around since 2011, probably earlier, introduced by Rebecca McKinnon, and in which she talked about three dimensions or three generations, three stages by which networked authoritarian practices are applied in order to basically impose control or power over citizens. That's the whole point, by the way. All of this is about power. All of this, these countries spend millions, maybe billions, I'm not sure. But the only thing they want is control and power. These are probably the two words that could summarize all of this. Control and power, whether over their citizens or over foreign citizens or neighboring citizens. That's the whole point of all of this, control and power. So for McKinnon, she talks about, as I said, three techniques followed by regimes. The first generation involve internet filtering, monitoring, and manual censorship. It's well-known techniques used by a lot of governments around the world. The second generation is more, let's say, improved, which includes construction of legal environment legitimizing control, which means here that courts, legal apparatus are in the state service. The third one dissolves the boundary between online and offline, and here where we see, for instance, human rights activists, journalists being harmed, sent to prison, sometimes disappearing, other times they get kidnapped, and so on and so forth. So we have so many examples of this, including, for example, from my home country, Iraq, where all of this is happening, actually, all of these three dimensions. So talking about network authoritarianism in the Arab world, we have some very much active states. using trolling campaigns in a very much systematic and organized way, including countries like, for instance, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Syria, and Egypt. They all do the same thing, of course, in different levels and different outreaches, and for different reasons as well. This is one example, by the way, from Omar Abdulaziz. I'm sure you've heard of him. He lives in Canada, Montreal. He's a Saudi human rights activist. His phone was hacked. But this image is taken from the Saudi trolls on social media using English language in order to influence foreign audiences to make them think that Omar Abdulaziz is affiliated with Al-Qaeda or ISIS and that he is a terrorist or terrorist sympathizer, should be sent back to Saudi Arabia. And that's the whole campaign. It's an ongoing campaign. And as you know, he's been also working with, or he worked with Khashoggi, Jamal Khashoggi, in creating the electronic bees. He also was active and still active, but it's an ongoing campaign against him, trying to attack his reputation and also influence different audiences. Now, what I'm going to do in the following slides is to apply the model I mentioned in the previous minutes about an information operation model, and I will use the 3 dimensions: the local, regional, and international. Because when you think about the target of these information operations, you can actually divide them into the geographic context by which these information operations take place. So I will start with the local dimension, or the top-down flow of operations. And I'm going to use one case study. It's about Iraq. It's taken from a recent peer-reviewed paper that got published, in which I looked at the way currently Shiite militias in the country, in Iraq, are using social media to influence and attack, as well as target journalists, human rights activists, news organizations, and even humanitarian organizations. It's a new thing because these are non-state actors, yet they are very much connected to the state, really influential in the country. And I was not aware of it, actually. I just finished writing a book. I called it The Iraqi Spring, which has been under review for a few months. And when I interviewed Iraqi human rights activists who were involved in the 2019 protest, all of them were Shiite. All of them told me that the militias have their own information operations, very organized, fully backed by Iran, and they are trying their best to influence public opinion as well as target the reputation of anyone who is critical of them. Anyone. So no matter who they are, they will be attacked. And when I looked at McKinnon's conceptualization, when we talk about networked authoritarianism, all of these techniques apply to this case study. So what did I find? I looked at Twitter, and I downloaded over 16,000 tweets using 6 Arabic hashtags for a period of over probably 4 years. I found 3 major themes. The relevant ones here are public shaming and personal attacks against journalists and human rights activists, and legal threats and misinformation accusations. So legal threats is a relatively new thing. So basically what they try to do is silence dissent by, first of all, warning people not to criticize them. Second, if that doesn't work, they actually start the legal process, which means these journalists will end up their cases will end up in courts, and most of them, I'm not aware of anyone who escaped this. Most of them end up in prison, unfortunately, because they do not have any backup or support from the political parties or the militias. Unfortunately, this is the case happening in Iraq and also many other countries. What I also found that even the UN representative in Iraq, Janine Blaskhart, she was also a target of these information operations because she was involved in the news about the 2021 election in the country. So I'll show you some of the memes that they distribute. I'm not sure whether you know this guy. He's famous in Iraq. He's called Ahmed Bashir. He has a famous talk show called Al-Bashir Talk Show on Dutch Welle, DW, the German TV. And in this TV show, just like the Egyptian guy, I forgot his name. Bassem Youssef, exactly. He actually was inspired by Bassem Youssef, and he once, I think, invited him to talk on his show. So he makes fun of the government, but look at how the militias try to portray him or represent him or show him. First of all, as a terrorist sympathizer. And of course, in Iraq, if someone calls you a Ba'athist today, you will be in big trouble. It's like Nazi, and if someone calling someone Nazi today, during the conflict. So you will be in big trouble. The other person being attacked is someone called Stephen Nabil. He's a human rights activist based in the US. He's also a journalist. And they usually make fun of them. They try to ridicule them and show that they are just clowns. Or there is another term called joker, which is popular, which has been popularly used during the protest in 2019. A second case here, related to theme one, is the way Sarmad al-Ta'i, an Iraqi journalist, was attacked by these militias, and now there are legal cases against him, including by the Supreme Court in Iraq, just because he criticized some of these militias on Al-Hurra TV, which is as you know, it's a U.S. I think it was Al-Iraqi and Al-Hurra TV, two TV stations. But in all cases, he ended up being portrayed as a joker, someone who's trying to create chaos in the country. The second theme, we talked about misinformation accusations are related to also attacking any critical voices. So, for instance, Saad al-Bazzaz, he's a famous Iraqi journalist who runs Al-Sharqiyya TV station. Not sure whether you are familiar with it, but it's very popular in Iraq. It's been continuously attacked. What is interesting here is the connection made between Al-Sharqiyya, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the US. It's an interesting thing, which I find to be very much like a dominant theme used by them. And Trump also usually is highlighted. And this is how they show the UN representative in the country. Again, like a devil, sometimes in some cases, actually, they were threatening to kill her as well, which I find to be a bit troubling. Now, I looked at the common users. So when I compared the different data sets on Twitter, I found over 390 common users who posted similar tweets around these hashtags that I collected, the 6 hashtags. I also found that the major profile similarities are related to using the images of Shiite imams. Some of them are fabricated, but a lot of them are generic images. So when I looked at, for instance, these are the profile images of the users attacking journalists. They share the same, there is a very clear pattern here. When I looked at the most active user, it's actually generated by AI. So you will never be able to know who they are at all. My conclusion is that any journalist, news organization who dare to attack them or criticize them will be immediately labeled as a Ba'athist. And by the way, the only reason I am very much at liberty to talk about them is because I'm talking in English. I don't think they will figure this out, really. Because I usually visit Iraq, this is the only thing, because they might even attack me as well. And as I said, usually legal action is used in order to silence any kind of dissenting voices. So this is just one case study about information operations happening in a local dimension. The reason why I chose Iraq is just because I did a study on that, but it happens in many other places. In Morocco, we did a study with the North Atlantic Council, and we identified also many users who were doing exactly the same thing. Cyber warriors, who were very much protecting, praising, as well as criticizing anyone who dared to say anything critical about the king. And we got attacked by that as well. So the sky's the limit. In Egypt, it's also very much the case. The same applies to hacking. So we talk about the local dimension where independent hackers try to influence government decisions, and this is the bottom up. So this is like just people who have no real power trying to influence the government. So it's bottom up information operation initiatives. So this is one example also from Iraq because I'm familiar with it. It's from a group called MAC M4X Pro, whatever. They have a Twitter account, but they were actually successful in defacing, which means removing a website and posting this image whereby they warn the government to be less corrupt, to be more transparent, and also to be less violent towards the activist. So the local dimension, again, wherever you want to look, any national context, you can find that kind of local dimension. Whether it's misinformation or hacking, it's all there. So there are like plenty of case studies. In some cases, the local dimension could be not related to a Middle Eastern country, but discusses or examines a Middle Eastern or Arab issue. Like I found this interesting. Like I'm based in Canada, so I was looking at Facebook ads in Canada, and I saw this ad. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with Facebook ads, but with Facebook ads, you can micro-target audiences. So you specify exactly who could see your ad. And all the people in this ad who saw this ad are based in Canada, over 1 million. And in this ad, it says something like, simple question, why should we give up our values and culture to those who want to impose their own on us? It's really Islamophobic, and the post continues to vilify Muslims and try to show that immigrants should be, kicked out of the country or not even allowed. When I did some digging, I found that this is actually taken from out of context. It has nothing to do with this. This is from the Dubai Expo event a long time ago, taken by Reuters, but notice how it's been twisted using an issue about the Middle East in order to target local audiences using misinformation. Another example also from Canada. I apologize, many examples from Canada, but I think David also, you did the same thing yesterday. So I'm taking some liberties here. I'm not sure whether you know about this or familiar with this or you remember this, when the Quebec mosque shooting happened in 2017, 6 people got killed. Someone went into the mosque and killed 6 Muslim people, Canadians. And I found that Rebel Media, Rebel News, was involved in spreading misinformation about this event, saying this, for instance, saying, the video suggests rivalry with another mosque, which means it's an inside job. We have nothing to do with it. It was the attack was conducted by a far-right, Islamophobic, racist terrorist. That was what the attack all about. But they are trying to twist it, and then their correspondent, Lawrence Southern. This is Lawrence Southern, a far-right provocateur, here on this YouTube video, trying to her best to show that, hey, yeah, it's not us, it's them. They are killing their own. We have nothing to do with this. Just to give you context, I'm not sure whether you know this lady. She went to New Zealand just a few months before the Christchurch attack, and gave a talk about the dangers, so-called dangers of Islam with Stéphane Molyneux, another far-right provocateur, white supremacist. And what happened was that, what's his name? Brenton Tarrant, he's the Christchurch attacker, was actually associated or connected or, let's say, sympathetic towards Lawrence Southern Rebel News. The attacker of Christchurch actually gave donation to Rebel News Media, the one I just showed you. He gave donations, a few $100s before the attack, and also gave donation to the other guy who accompanied Lawrence Southern, again, just a few weeks before the attack. So there is a connection. There is a connection between what happens inside the local dimension and the international dimension because of the networked world where we live in today. It happens. What happens in one country could expand and move to other places. The same applies to the regional dimension. So this is an image from Emirati or Egyptian trolls trying to show Al Jazeera journalists as being electronic bees. Electronic flies. And here they attacked all of them. It's an ongoing thing for them, for the Saudi, Emirati, all Al Jazeera journalists, supporters, are not credible. It's an ongoing theme we find on social media. One of the techniques they use in information operations is the weaponization of spamming. So, for instance, when they find any critical voices, they try to report and keep on spamming. And here, this is the technique used. Of course, they try to show that some of the critical voices are allegedly associated with terrorism or ISIS. In this way, they will be able to remove these users from the platform. And that's their goal, is to remove anyone who is critical of their respective governments. In some cases, they actually provide details about how to do this. For example, here, they even provide it in 2 languages. You report, you engage with, you threaten, and in the end, someone will be blocked. They give direct instructions about how this could be done. And all of this could be found on, on social media. They can tell you exactly how all of these information operations take place. So as I said before, either it happens through misinformation, weaponization of spamming, or weaponization of reporting on social media, or defacing. Some of the other examples on defacing are here. This is this is an Iranian website allegedly defaced by a Saudi hacker called this crazy something. When I say allegedly, because I have no power or no way to make sure that this was actually a Saudi hacker. No one knows. But this is what they do. Or the opposite. We have, for instance, many examples from the so-called Yemeni cyber army. But the Yemeni cyber army, mind you, is probably not Yemeni. Most probably it's an Iranian hacking group doing exactly the same thing against the Saudis. This is a website, a Saudi website, defaced, and also having some kind of images. International dimension also applies here. So this is from the Syrian cyber army, which is now not active anymore. This is defacing the CBC. It's like the BBC in Canada. When I accessed it, I got this image. So just in brief, when we talk about information operations, we can think of it in different dimensions: the local, regional, international. In some cases, there are overlaps, of course. And the best example I can give you about the overlap is what is happening today in Palestine. So there is a lot of misinformation happening, and it's a big problem that we have. So I have about 15 minutes left, right?
13 minutes.
13, but I tied myself. I have 31. I'm very empirical.
14.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very empirical. That's my work, by the way. But I'll be done. I just have the issue of Palestine, which is very important, and the Khashoggi case, and then I will be done. So misinformation during the war in Palestine. It's an ongoing thing. What intrigues me is Facebook ads. Because, these are people paying money to spread messages. Most of these messages contain misinformation. This is troubling for me. I mean, you have the right to do whatever you want on social media. Go ahead, be my guest. But when it comes to paying money to spread in misinformation, and during which you can also micro-target your audiences, this is for me troubling. So these are some examples. For instance, Taylor Swift. This is a website claiming that one of the bodyguards of Taylor Swift is an IDF member. This is false, totally false. It's been debunked by Bellingcat. Everyone knows this, but it's spreading on Facebook ads. Something else from the Jerusalem Post, which I find very misleading. They post two pictures, one of Gaza before and after October 7, claiming that, hey, the IDF bombed Hamas locations. These are mostly residential areas. You cannot mislead people about what you're doing here. And this is the Jerusalem Post. It's supposed to be mainstream, credible. I mean, for Israel, it's not at all. What I find also troubling is the kind of posts we have on social media using memes. They're supposed to be funny and light-hearted, whatever, but a lot of them have sinister meanings. So, belittling the suffering of Palestinians, like, for example, comparing the destruction of Gaza to Lego pieces, or talking about Gaza strips here, like KFC. Or the other troubling one is the bulldozer. The bulldozer is this image, is actually calling for genocide. This image is calling for genocide. And it's so popular on social media in so many other places. And so that's the problem. So when I look at other ads, as you can see here, for instance, other ads call for genocide. For instance, this one, promoting a shirt called One Shot, Two Kills, talking about how it's okay to kill a pregnant Palestinian woman because it's okay. This was actually covered back in time, about 2018, and the IDF members said, oh, that was a joke. They have different T-shirts. The second example, by the way, is here. There are other T-shirts, like you should use condoms instead of having kids in Palestine because we will kill them in the end. And when interviewed, they said, oh, it's a joke. You cannot joke about genocide. So what they are trying to do is to make it funny. Again, it's all part of dehumanizing Palestinians. Or this one in Hebrew, where the Al Jazeera journalist is being likened to or shown as sympathetic or connected to Hamas. Again, to legitimize and give them the liberty of attacking them, because for them it's a legitimate target. Yesterday, I thought maybe I can see more examples. I actually find this. This is on Facebook ads. These are two people. I don't know who they are, but I've checked. One of them is Paul Larudi. He's an Iranian-American human rights activist who is very pro-Palestinian. Second one is also a human rights activist called Zahar Birawi. One is based in the US, one is based in the UK, but notice how they are presented, like legitimate targets. These are like foreign citizens. Like, for me, this is very troubling, honestly. This is something that Facebook gets money to do, which is very, very, very difficult to understand. I know my time, but this is very important. Okay. Lastly, Palestinian children. This is how they are shown in Facebook ads. So notice this is in Hebrew again. One is trying to show that Israeli children are learning knowledge and they are enlightened, whereas Palestinian children are only living in the dark, and they are engulfed in or very much engaged in dark lives and terrorism, or they are taught in schools only terrorism by Hamas and so on. Again, this is all part of genocidal efforts, and Facebook is complicit. But no one is holding Facebook accountable, unfortunately. I mean, some people talk, but actually this requires government action, because Facebook does not listen to Honestly, I'm not important, but maybe they will listen to governments, large NGOs, maybe. So that's the thing. We need a collective effort to make or hold Facebook accountable for these actions. So these are the problems with Facebook ads. I do have a few slides about Russian trolls as well. So as you know, I'm giving you many examples. So I talked about the US, I talked about the Arab countries, and then of course Russia is involved. Like again, these information operations are not exclusive to specific countries. They are utilized by the majority of countries, as I have seen. Russians as well, they use Islam, for instance, to target foreign audiences. When I looked at the Twitter datasets released in which foreign trolls have been identified, this was one of them. A very Islamophobic user trying to show that Islam is a problem. Obama is ISIS. Again, here are some of the tweets. Especially targeting immigrants, refugees from the Middle East, specifically targeting that. This is also the same user talking about the Quebec mosque shooting. Notice what this same user says. Seems like the suspect is Moroccan Muslim. This is what he said. All misinformation or trying to influence foreign audiences. When I looked at the way Russian trolls talk about immigrants, especially the use of hashtag, these are the top 10 hashtags that they use. Notice what they use. So some of the first one is Islam is the problem. Stop Islam. Ban Sharia law. Stop whatever. Basically trying to show that anyone coming from the Middle East should be banned, should be stopped, and so on, vilifying them in different ways. But also micro-targeting audiences. So this does not only apply, this kind of vilification does not apply to all countries. When I looked, for example, how Russian trolls targeted Canadians with issues of immigration, I found that they were actually talking about it in a positive way. So this is a fake Facebook page called United Muslims of America. And the title of this ad says, "No place for war, helping refugees to find a new home." This is when they target Canadians. Compare this with the other one, targeting Americans and people living in the Netherlands. It says, "This has become a real problem, stop refugees, especially from the Middle East." Now, we are talking about the same actor, totally changing their message in order to micro-target their audiences. This is a good example of the way information operations have been utilized in order to influence people or the public. Okay, I have 5 minutes, right? Okay. Either I skip Jamal Khashoggi or we stop here. I still have one case study, which is Khashoggi. I need about 10 minutes. We can skip him.
Can you summarize it?
I can summarize it, sure. So last case study, Jamal Khashoggi. I was interested to see how Jamal Khashoggi was discussed by Saudi trolls. So I made use of the Twitter datasets that were released a few years ago, before Elon Musk took over. There were about 78 million tweets that I looked at. I use big data. I use also a supercomputer to filter the tweets, especially referencing Khashoggi. I found from these 78 million, about 30,000 that referenced him. So I was interested to see, okay, how did they talk about him? And did they talk about him during the same day he was killed or not? And that is the basis of a research paper that I published, which I found to be important. So this is one of the major findings that I had. The Saudi trolls started or initiated a Twitter campaign just 30 minutes after Jamal Khashoggi went inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. There is no way this is a coincidence. You cannot tell me this is a coincidence. I will never be convinced. It's October 2nd, 2018. That's the day he went inside the consulate. 30 minutes afterwards, based on these Twitter datasets I've found, there was a series of campaigns targeting Jamal Khashoggi. One of them is, hey Erdogan, where is Khashoggi? And Khashoggi's candles, especially Khashoggi's candles, started 30 minutes afterwards. The first reference to his disappearance was posted by a troll, a Saudi troll, and it said something like, who is the donkey? The stupid person? Yeah. So basically, this tweet is saying that we know Qatar is involved. Probably Qatar took Jamal Khashoggi. It's not the Saudis. Again, trying to deflect, any kind of blame, and is spreading misinformation as well. So this is the timeline. If you notice, I looked back in time. So references to Jamal Khashoggi there were nothing about him, just one or two. But on the day he disappeared, there were 195 tweets about him, exactly 30 minutes after he entered the consulate. Sometimes they use even clickbaits, paid users in order to spread misinformation about Khashoggi. This was exactly a few hours after he disappeared by a user who seems to be a clickbait because it's not related actually, something like a puzzle, whatever, but also using the same hashtag Fada'ah Jamal Khashoggi, exactly about 1 hour after his disappearance. And so many, of course, images were associated, like these ones, all this information, trying to show, hey, it's not us, Khashoggi just went away, probably Turkey is involved, Erdogan or Qatar involved. And later on, when they were caught red-handed, they were doing their best to connect him to Al-Qaeda, to extremism, and of course posting such images. And this kind of accusation or attacks did not only target Khashoggi, but also his fiancée. So notice how they show his fiancée. Hatish Cengiz, I think. I'm not sure about how to pronounce her first name. But all of this to show that some of it is sexist as well, to show her that she is involved with Qatar in the disappearance of Khashoggi. And of course, similar to Iraq, there were these posts threatening anyone who would post anything about Khashoggi with legal action, exactly like Iraq. So my conclusion, thank you, Mohamad, for your patience, is what? Is that many disinformation campaigns promoted on different platforms have been active in spreading false information about different cases like Gaza, Khashoggi, human rights activists, and the Arab Spring, of course. The Saudi trolls largely failed in convincing the world about their disinformation operations. For many reasons, including the continuous pressure on them, the Turkish government actions, especially the prompt action by the Turkish government, and the fact that there was a lot of evidence, especially cameras, provided by the Turkish authorities. That was important. And today, most Middle Eastern governments follow similar techniques in surveilling, attacking, trolling critical voices, especially human rights activists and journalists, whether they are inside or outside their countries. But I would like to highlight the word inside a bit, because it's really hard for independent journalists to work independently in most Arab countries, unfortunately, including even humanitarian organizations. This is really unfortunate. So most of this is happening in the diaspora. Israel, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE have employed sophisticated surveillance tools, often involving hacking operations. And that's how, again, I go back to the two words I mentioned in the beginning, control and power. These are the two main words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Rawi, for that excellent presentation and for respecting the time. I think it was exactly 45 minutes.
Yes.
So we will have about 20 minutes for questions and answers, okay? So what we'll try to do here is take a few questions at once. I ask that you kindly state your name before you ask your question, and I ask that you please keep your questions brief. No monologues. Just get right to your question, and then we'll ask Dr. Rawi to respond, and then hopefully we'll take another round. So questions. تفضل.
السلام عليكم اعذروني اتكلم باللغه
May the
العربيه.
peace and blessings of God be upon you all. My name is Amr Qazzaz from Al Jazeera Network. Our duty is to verify stories, and I would like to talk to Dr. Al-Rawi about the analysis that we had carried out when it comes to the field hospital in Gaza. We worked on the story, we worked on the misinformation that was spread by the Israelis. We found out that they were trying to promote images by Al Jazeera Mubashir through a number of networks. So they started working on in excess of 70 kind of tweets, and this kind of account was adopted by the official sources in Israel. So when we verified those pictures, we found out that there were problems, and we were able to get pictures from Tel Aviv, and we were able to condone this misinformation. Also, the killing of 40 babies in the southern part of Gaza. This is another story. So we saw that there was misinformation, disinformation carried out, and this was carried out as a result on a number of accounts on Twitter, and the accounts were adopted by the Israeli journalists. So the adoption of such kind of stories, whether these are Western or Israeli accounts on such kind of misinformation, is a challenge for us. And that is why it is something that is incumbent, or makes it incumbent on us to verify such sources. So do you have a question? So how can we confront this machinery? We're not talking about the misinformation that takes place, but also the official accounts. And the other point that I would like to talk about, how the different companies facilitate the task of those who carry out acts of misinformation. We have seen what has happened in Gaza and how misinformation is facilitated and made easy by the Israelis and the Americans alike.
Dr. Al-Rawi, for that excellent and very informative presentation. So it was really interesting because as you were talking, I'm sitting here taking notes, and I'm like, same thing in Iran, same thing in Iran. Like all those different strategies that you were mentioning are very similar to things that have happened in Iran. And you come from a very interesting position because you've done these kinds of various case studies on so many different countries. So I'm wondering, and this is something I've kind of been struggling with, I guess over the past couple of days, and figuring out what is the key takeaway of this conference. And I guess given your work in kind of a comparative sense where you have so much information from so many different places and it looks the same, what's the offering? Is it about technique? Are we here to talk about different techniques of manipulation and kind of information control that various governments are using to their benefit? And then, or is it about like grand theories of control and power? I feel like there's something at the meso level that I'd be really interested to kind of hear you work through and what that is. Is it just, is it just about technique? Is it just about power? Or is there something in the middle that we're kind of missing?
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions from this side? تفضل.
طيب شكرا على
I would like to thank you for the presentation. I would like to thank you for this excellent lecture. When we try to follow the different campaigns that are carried out, such as the campaign against Palestine or against Sudan, or the campaign against the killing of Khashoggi, all the campaigns that have been carried out, I think they come out of the same kitchen, if we may call it so. The same tools, the same methodologies. We're talking about bots that are used, trolls are used in order to follow the cases that are under scrutiny. So do you agree with me when I say that there are companies now that are specialized in such an endeavor? Perhaps countries stand behind them, organizations organizations stand behind them. These are utilized when need be. Do you agree with me? Shukran.
For the excellent presentation. Regarding mis and disinformation, I would have loved to listen to much more about the conceptualization, because I don't know, you spoke about how it should be governments who should intervene and ask platforms to remove that kind of content. But when the European Union was discussing that with the Digital Services Act, they decided that the only content that had to be removed was what they called illegal content, and mainly that's hate speech and something that they consider. And misinformation was always, it's inconvenient, it might be dangerous, but you cannot remove this information because it's just contentious, like it's just part of the debate, right? Whereas, as you have shown, as we have seen in the cases of Palestine and in others, misinformation and disinformation can lead to real-world consequences, to real-world danger. So, what will be your position? Do you think there's it's a difference in conceptualization, or it's just the fact that governments do not want to interfere too much in platforms because of self-regulation and the power that they have? Thanks so much.
So I think maybe Dr. Al-Rawi could address these questions first briefly, and then we'll come back and take a second round. So let's start with the last question, maybe about freedom of speech and its limits and what we should do about this issue.
Okay. Yes, thank you. These are all books. Every single question could be a book, honestly. So book number one is the difference between misinformation and hate speech. Honestly, both of them are protected speech. I mean, it's something I mentioned in the presentation. If you have misinformation, be my guest, go ahead. I mean, no one is stopping you, and it's everywhere. Now, the news media is involved, and I think we talked about the case from Al Jazeera and how even states are involved. It's like everywhere. It's everywhere, honestly. So as I mentioned in my conceptualization, even politicians are engaged in spreading misinformation. So both of them are protected speech, but of course we have to be, first of all, critical and also wary about the potential impact. So there are laws, but these laws do not usually apply to some minorities. So for instance, when you talk about genocide against Muslims in Western countries like Canada, it's okay. It's freedom of speech. But against other groups, no. Especially, for instance, Jewish group. It's fine. It's correct, I think, especially because of anti-Semitism. That's correct. But if you really want to apply that rule, it should be applicable to everyone. That's the gap that we have seen in Western countries in general, and in North America as well. It does not apply to Muslims at all. So again, when people protest, they say, well, it's our freedom to say whatever we want. But actually, they are calling for genocide. Am I okay, Mohamad?
Yeah, you're good. But we want to, just so we can get more questions.
That's the thing. I'm telling you, each one is a book.
It's a book, I know.
Okay. I'm going back to the other question.
Yeah, there was a question here about, he's saying that it's kind of the same approach, and maybe it's the same source or the same few organizations that are spreading this information. What do you think about that?
That's the other question. Good question. Yeah, of course. The Israeli government has its own ongoing campaign called the Hasbara. It's ongoing. They try to utilize every single means to influence people. I was on TikTok a few hours ago, and there were people live on TikTok promoting genocide, promoting the Israeli narrative. It's ongoing. It's an ongoing thing, whether they are state-related or cyber warriors, mind you. Cyber warriors are people very much connected to the state's narrative. We don't know. But they are doing the thing. They are doing exactly the same objective of the Israeli government or the state itself. Could it be intentional? Definitely. There are many groups that are organized, well-funded in order to promote these things. The Facebook ads I showed you, that's money. That's not someone, sitting in the basement sending messages in his free time. No, that's people spending money, using their credit cards to spread misinformation and hate, as well as promoting genocide. That's my problem. So there is money involved.
We had a question from over here about kind of the takeaway from the conference. Are we talking about more government techniques or more grand theories?
Yeah, that's
of
a good
control and
question, by
power?
the way. That's a really good question. My response with this to be, first of all, the takeaway is to be critical, number one. That's very important. Step number one is critical of what we see around us. And I think we are all critical, which is why we are here, number one. Number two would be, when we are critical, we develop skills. We develop skills that will help us maybe identify other information operations. And from there, maybe, just maybe, we can generate other theories to talk about the meso dimension, to understand the bigger picture. So, many people think that empirical research is very limited. I disagree. Actually, most of the grand theories we have in the field, even Marxism, even so many other big theories, they started with small case studies, empirical case studies, which were generated to, introduce to us new theories. So why not you look at, for instance, the case of Iran, and maybe you can introduce a theory based on these case studies. It could be possible, but challenging. My takeaway from this is to be aware, critical, and maybe afterwards generate theories. I hope I'm convinced. Oh, it's good. It's good. Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully.
That's a good transition into the last question about how should we oppose or deal with or address disinformation. What do you think are practical strategies for us?
The best strategy is show the facts in an organized, appealing, systematic way. There is no one who would challenge you if you do that. But once you hide something or don't show the full details, then people will not take you seriously. Again, we are not doing this in the Arab world in a good way. We need much more, and we have to be better equipped. This is what I think should happen.
Excellent. Let's take 3 or 4 more questions. Saif, I know you had a question. We'll take 3 or 4 more. I ask that everybody be brief, and then we have about 10 minutes, so hopefully we can get through all of these. Go ahead.
My name is Saif Al-Islami, and I work at the Arab Center. I'm speaking here.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you so much for your interesting lecture, and I find it it has a lot of information. My question is about your first chart you've presented, and you was shedding the light more on the role of elites of spreading the misinformation, and especially after October the 7th, we have a new variable in the West. I think it's not new, but it's more obvious now that we see a president of the United States is spreading propaganda, is spreading lies, clear lies, and then the same institution, the White House, is denying it the next day, and they say no, this is not true. I'm here talking about the 40 beheaded babies, which is a big lie there, and then it was scientifically journalistic proven that it is a big lie. And other things too. My question here is, this is a new variable, so how this will affect the public opinion in the West? This is number one. And how this will, shed the light more on the work of some corporations or some agencies who work on validating the information of the governments and the officials. I'm not talking about some elites or politicians, because politicians are always lie, but people who are in charge, people who are in responsibility. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
My question is about the LinkedIn platforms and how much analysis is going on in the LinkedIn platform, specifically with Palestine. What I'm noticing on UN websites and UN posts is there'll be very negative opposite comments supporting Israel and saying, well, Hamas is the problem. And so I'm just noticing that just as I check LinkedIn. So I'm curious about, how accessible is LinkedIn as a data set and so forth, and what are people researching on that? Thanks.
Go ahead.
My name is El Sayed, University of Manchester. I have two quick questions. First one is about the timing. My impression is this all started in the Arab world or the Middle East basically since 2010, 2011. I wonder if you agree with this or not. And what I mean by this, the information, misinformation campaigns, etc., and mobilization on social media. That's the first question. Second one, which is related to this, as we were talking yesterday about materiality, digital, non-digital, and infrastructure. Of course, this didn't start by 2010 and 2011. So I wonder, and I know this is a difficult question, but I'm working on something similar related to Egypt. Since when this started, the integration of the digital as part of state infrastructure into mobilizing on social media and etc. Information and disinformation campaign, if you get what I mean.
Sorry, the second part I didn't get. The second question I didn't get. The digitalization infrastructure, I didn't get it.
Exactly.
When did states start mobilizing their resources to try to engage in this kind of propaganda?
Arab and Middle Eastern states.
Arab and Middle Eastern states.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody on this side? Okay, go ahead. Yep.
Thank you for this presentation. My question is whether, like, it's more on semantics. I'm wondering if there's like a power element involved in terms of classifying what is disinformation and what isn't. So, for example, like when you're looking at the Palestinian side and looking at the disinformation circulating around the hostages, saying that there's like a Stockholm syndrome sort of experience and them falling for their captors or whatever, there's like rather maybe people don't feel the need to be hesitant to highlight that. And I'm wondering if the power element, perhaps in terms of like what captures more audience attention, is also involved in classifying what is disinformation or what isn't. I don't know if there's another word for that to highlight those things. So I'm wondering if there's a normative dimension too. Thank you.
Okay, one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Elahe Islami. I'm from Central European University. My question is about how activists and journalists cope with this situation, basically the digital space that is contaminated with disinformation and misinformation. And I know from the case of Iran that there are really good initiatives even for fact-checking and I mean, not just collectives, but also individuals have their own techniques and strategies to cope with the situation. Is it going to be part of your work, and how important is that to talk about this stuff? Thank you.
Okay. Let us start with, this is an easy one, I think.
There's no easy question. Come on. This
Well,
is not easy.
it was
For
a
you, easy. For me, not.
It was a short question.
Okay.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, the LinkedIn. By the way, it's not easy. This one's the most technical question. So, yeah, for sure. There is it's a highly under-researched platform. Thank you so much for. And usually people don't care about how we get the data. It's just like what you found. But they never examine or ask us like, what did you do to get the data? Yeah, it's a nightmare. Especially after Elon Musk, for instance, took over Twitter. He stopped the official academic API. So basically, we don't have access anymore. For LinkedIn, there is one or two tools that are very limited in what could be captured. It's like crawlers developed by Amsterdam University. I can tell you about it, but it's really limited. So it remains a very much under-researched platform. When it comes to the systematic study of LinkedIn, I couldn't find probably just a handful, if none. Okay. So, could be a thesis, could be an excellent book, honestly.
Next question. Yeah. We only have a few minutes, about 3 minutes left. Saif was talking about the role of elites in spreading lies, like the U.S. president. How do you think this will affect public opinion?
Yeah, the elites, a great question. Whether we like it or not, they remain influencers. So people listen to them. Elon Musk is one of them. So they could be very potentially involved in spreading lies. And it's not only new thing, it's been ongoing. Because you used the word new twice, by the way. I wrote it down. It's not new. I mean, the example I gave you from George Bush, and the war on Iraq in 2003. The lies were there by all the Bush administration. And if you go back in time, it's all there. It's just a pattern. Politicians lie. And a journalist's job is to hold them accountable and show the lies. Otherwise, we'll be in big trouble, like the trouble we have today, honestly. So it's a collective effort. So talking about whose job is it, fact checkers, I don't think so. Honestly, it's not only the fact checkers. There are so many people. And also fact checking itself has been weaponized. I did a study about fact checking, for example, in the Arab world. A lot of it is so limited and also focused on certain places. So, for example, a fact checker organization in Egypt does not talk about anything related to, for instance, criticism of Sisi. They can't. They cannot even mention the word. It does not get out of their mouths. And the same thing with Morocco fact checking or in the UAE. This is not fact checking. This is a weaponized, limited something organization. So it's a collective effort, honestly.
When did Arab states start mobilizing their resources to engage in these disinformation campaigns?
Good question. Tracing the beginnings definitely started with social media, but if you look at the misinformation campaigns in the Arab world, they go back in time, probably back. Jamal Abdel Nasser was involved with his Radio Al-Arab, I think, Radio Arab. But exactly, that was a very major propaganda tool. Saddam Hussein has his own radio stations targeting Syria, Saudi Arabia, and just like it's a whole mess. Just before the social media, emerged. No one has done research because there is very little empirical evidence about when it started, how. But they increasingly realize that social media has become an important thing. My suggestion here is look at social media use in the different countries and the development of it. And based on that, you can infer. But there is no evidence on when it started. Unless you interview government agencies, they will never talk to you about when they had their own campaigns initiated. No one will talk to you, by the way. And by the way, if you ask the question, you'll kind of go to jail.
Okay, can you give us 30 seconds on advice for activists regarding fact-checking, and do you have anything in your book on this, or any of your books?
This is an excellent question, but there was a question about power.
We'll come to it. Just give us 30 seconds.
I actually interviewed so many journalists from India. We had another with UBC, University of British Columbia. We sent a survey to over 600 journalists from around the world about the same topic. It's called reputational attacks. You can see it online. Reputational attacks against journalists. And it's a huge problem because it's affecting their mental health, their also well-being. A lot of people are going to get treatment. Some of them change their lifestyles. A lot of them got really sick. There were really sad stories about people getting seriously sick because of these attacks. My work on racialized Canadian journalists is exactly the same thing, and probably all of them said they are going to mental health checks, and they change their lifestyles, including the fact that some of them even deleted their social media accounts because they couldn't take it anymore. By the way, the situation in India is very terrible when it comes to attacking journalists because of Modi and his government.
The last question was about, are we being selective and subjective in classifying disinformation, and is there a power element?
Good question. The principle we follow in fact-checking is scientific consensus. That's the term. Is there consensus that a certain thing happened or not, or a certain issue is right or wrong? If yes, we follow that. If not, we cannot fact check it, because fact checkers are not supposed to be taking the role of gods. There is no such thing. But we follow a principle, collective, it's called collective intelligence, which means checking the consensus about certain things. Mind you, it's a relative thing because things change. Our views about, for instance, the pandemic, about masking. In the beginning, there was consensus that it's not needed, but that consensus changed afterwards, insisting that we have to mask. So we need to follow consensus at that time, but it's a relative thing.
Excellent. Please join me in giving Dr. Al-Rawi a round of applause for the excellent presentation and Q&A. And another round of applause for you guys for asking great questions.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Okay, the next session is supposed to start in about 10 minutes, correct? Thank you all.
And I have to be there for that session.